Yeah, we did some of the Star Wars, or not Star Wars, you just said Star Wars, some of the Sesame Street ones, and my kid's been super into those, so that's cute.
Yeah, that is really cute. All right, so it's being recorded, so are we good?
Yeah, take it away.
Okay, I guess I should introduce myself a little bit. So I'm Kathryn. So I'm a therapist here at the clinic, and so Headspace, super cool that Tanager is offering Headspace. I've been using it for about 10 years, and in that time, it went through a phase where it got really, really popular. And I think it's a little, you see less about it now. Emma Watson has stopped talking about it, which she was for a long time. But either way, it's an app that I got into because it was recommended to me by a few different psychiatrists, a neuroscientist friend. And then at the time, I was doing some meditation training through Vipassana, which is a type of meditation. And one of the monks who taught it said that Headspace was a good app to use if you want some guidance on using mindfulness and meditation on your own. So I thought that we'd talk a little bit. I would just give an overview of like why it's so hyped up a little bit, why it's kind of, I would argue, like the best meditation app that's out there, and then some tips for navigating it. In the past 10 years, it went from being like this really simple little app to having quite a lot of content that can just be a lot to try to navigate. Okay, so mindfulness, I'm sure I'm kind of preaching to the choir, but it is a term that gets thrown around a lot. Um, so the definition that I like the most is by John Kabat-Zinn, who created mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is a therapeutic modality. And it's mindfulness is awareness that rises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So there's been a ton of research in the last few decades about mindfulness, meditation, and other contemplative practice and the impact that it can have on the mind, on mental health, and just on the human experience. So, like I said, contemplative practice is sort of the overarching umbrella term for this stuff. And then meditation kind of comes from Buddhist tradition, but it exists kind of in every different religious tradition. So mindfulness meditation has become the most studied, and there's probably a lot of reasons for that. I don't know what they are, but it's made it a pretty popular buzzword that gets used a lot. And over time, it's also been integrated into a lot of different therapeutic interventions. So specifically the ones that come to mind, obviously mindfulness-based stress reduction, but also dialectical behavior therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy have pretty strong mindfulness components to them. And so typically, it's taught through Buddhist meditation instruction. Headspace is really interesting in that it teaches it the same way that if you were to go to like a Zen Buddhist monastery and sit down with someone to learn how to meditate, it would be quite similar to what Headspace is teaching you to do. So when you look at the research, if you're looking at using an app to help you kind of gain those benefits that research suggests mindfulness can have, Headspace is a great way to do it. So you can't really talk about Headspace without talking about the founder. He stepped away from it a little bit in the last few years, but he kind of got the ball rolling on everything. And he used to do like TED Talks and lectures. He was on Oprah stuff. He was kind of everywhere for a while. So his name's Andy. At 22, he went and was ordained in Zen Buddhism and worked throughout the world as a monk. He then came back to the UK and started doing consulting around mindfulness. It was sort of when some of that was getting picked up in businesses and things like that. It was getting a little trendy. And so then he partnered with someone to make the app, which launched in 2012. So his goal was just to kind of make these skills and these things that you talk about within Buddhist meditation practice and how to kind of translate them into something that's useful for everyone. So now I don't know if anyone has been on the app. There is a lot. So that's kind of what I'll kind of navigate you through for the second part. But there's like a million different guided meditations. There's podcasts, there's psychoeducation, there's stuff about breath work. It's grown from just kind of teaching people to meditate and to use mindfulness skills to being much bigger. So really, one of the things that Andy did that was really popular is he did a TED Talk. It's about 9 minutes. So before I get into details about using the app, I thought I would just play that if this works. I'm always suspicious about PowerPoint, but we'll see if it works. Because I think he gives like the best overview of what he's trying to accomplish with this app.
We live in an incredibly busy world. The pace of life is often frantic. Our minds are always busy and we're always doing something. So with that in mind, I'd like just to take a moment to think, when did you last take any time to do nothing? Just 10 minutes, undisturbed. And when I say nothing, I do mean nothing. So that's no emailing, texting, no internet, no TV, no chatting, no eating, no reading. Not even sitting there reminiscing about the past or planning for the future. Simply doing nothing. I see a lot of very blank faces. My thinking is it's probably have to go a long way back. And this is an extraordinary thing, right? We're talking about our mind. The mind, our most valuable and precious resource through which we experience every single moment of our life. The mind that we rely upon to be happy, content, emotionally stable as individuals, and at the same time to be kind and thoughtful and considerate in our relationships with others. This is the same mind that we depend upon to be focused, creative, spontaneous, and to perform at our very best in everything that we do. And yet we don't take any time out to look after it. In fact, we spend more time looking after our cars, our clothes, and our hair than okay, maybe not our hair, but you see where I'm going. The result, of course, is that we get stressed. You know, the mind whizzes away like a washing machine going round and round, lots of difficult, confusing emotions. And we don't really kind of know how to deal with that. And the sad fact is that we are so distracted that we're no longer present in the world in which we live. We miss out on the things that are most important to us. And the crazy thing is that everybody just assumes, well, that's the way life is, so we just kind of got to get on with it. That's really not how it has to be. So I was about 11 when I went along to my first meditation class. And trust me, it had all the stereotypes that you can imagine, sitting cross-legged on the floor, the incense, the herbal tea, the vegetarians, the whole deal. But my mum was going and I was intrigued, so I went along with her. I'd also seen a few Kung Fu movies, and secretly I kind of thought I might be able to learn how to fly, but I was very young at the time, you know. Now, as I was there, you know, I guess like a lot of people, I assumed that it was just an aspirin for the mind. You get stressed, you do some meditation. I hadn't really thought that it could be sort of preventative in nature until I was about sort of 20, when a number of things happened in my life in quite quick succession. Really serious things, which just flipped my life upside down. And all of a sudden I was inundated with thoughts, inundated with difficult emotions that I didn't know how to cope with. Every time I sort of pushed one down, another one would just sort of pop back up again. It was a really very stressful time. I guess we all deal with stress in different ways. Some people will bury themselves in work, grateful for the distraction. Others will turn to their friends, their family, looking for support. Some people hit the bottle, start taking medication. My own way of dealing with it was to become a monk. So I quit my degree. I headed off to the Himalayas. I became a monk and I started studying meditation. People often ask me, you know, what I learned from that time. Well, obviously it changed things, you know. Let's face it, becoming a celibate monk is going to change a number of things. But it was more than that. You know, it taught me, it gave me a greater appreciation and understanding for the present moment. By that, I mean not being lost in thought, not being distracted, not being overwhelmed by difficult emotions, but instead learning how to be in the here and now, how to be mindful, how to be present. I think the present moment is so underrated. It sounds so ordinary, and yet we spend so little time in the present moment that it's anything but ordinary. There was a research paper that came out of Harvard just recently that said on average, our minds are lost in thought almost 47% of the time, 47%. At the same time, this sort of constant mind wandering is also a direct cause of unhappiness. Now, we're not here for that long anyway, but to spend almost half of our life lost in thought and potentially quite unhappy, I don't know, it kind of seems tragic, actually, especially when there's something we can do about it. When there's a positive, practical, achievable, scientifically proven technique which allows our mind to be more healthy, to be more mindful and less distracted. And the beauty of it is that even though it kind of need only take about 10 minutes a day, it impacts our entire life. But we need to know how to do it. We need an exercise, we need a framework to learn how to be more mindful. That's essentially what meditation is. It's familiarizing ourselves with the present moment. But we also need to know how to approach it in the right way to get the best from it. And that's what these are for, in case you've been wondering. Because most people assume that meditation is all about sort of stopping thoughts, getting rid of emotions, somehow controlling the mind. But actually, it's quite different from that. It's more about sort of stepping back, sort of seeing the thought clearly, witnessing it coming and going, emotions coming and going without judgment, but with a relaxed, focused mind. So, for example, right now, if I focus too much on the balls, then there's no way that I can relax and talk to you at the same time. Equally, if I relax too much talking to you, then there's no way I can focus on the balls. I'm going to drop them. Now, in life and in meditation, there'll be times when the focus becomes a little bit too intense and life starts to feel a bit like this. It's a very uncomfortable way to live life when we get this tight and stressed. At other times, we might take our foot off the gas a little bit too much, and things just become a little bit like this. And of course, in meditation, we can end up falling asleep. So we're looking for a balance of focused relaxation where we can allow thoughts to come and go without all the usual involvement. Now, what usually happens when we're learning to be mindful is that we get distracted by a thought. Let's say this is an anxious thought. So everything's going fine, and then we see the anxious thought, and it's like, oh, didn't realize I was worried about that. You go back to it, repeat it. Oh, I am worried. Oh, I really am worried. Wow, there's so much anxiety. And before we know it, right, we're anxious about feeling anxious. You know, this is crazy. We do this all the time, even on an everyday kind of level. If you think about the last time, I don't know, you had a wobbly tooth. You know it's wobbly, and you know that it hurts. But what do you do every 20, 30 seconds? I don't know. It does hurt. And we reinforce the storyline, right? And we just keep telling ourselves. And we do it all the time. And it's only in learning to watch the mind in this way that we can start to let go of those storylines and patterns of mind. But when you sit down and you watch the mind in this way, you might see many different patterns. You might find a mind that's really sort of restless and the whole time, you know, don't be surprised if you feel a bit agitated in your body when you sit down to do nothing and your mind feels like that. You might find a mind that's very sort of dull and boring, and it's just almost mechanical. It just sort of seems it's as if you're just sort of getting up, going to work, eat, sleep, get up. Or it might just be that one little nagging thought that just goes round and round and round your mind. Whatever it is, meditation offers the opportunity, the potential to step back and to get a different perspective, to see that things aren't always as they appear. You know, we can't change every little thing that happens to us in life, but we can change the way that we experience it. That's the potential of meditation, of mindfulness. You don't have to burn any incense, and you definitely don't have to sit on the floor. All you need to do is to take 10 minutes out a day to step back, to familiarize yourself with the present moment so that you get to experience a greater sense of focus, calm, and clarity in your life. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now, how do I get it? Okay, so I'm having trouble getting it to go to the next page, which isn't great. Okay, let me maybe stop share. Okay, I'm gonna pull out of it and then I'm gonna go back in and see if I can get it from a different spot. Okay. All right. Slideshow. It's not popping up. All right. Well, I hope you can see it here. I'll just kind of walk through it this way. Okay, so how do you get started? So the first step is to kind of decide how you want to go about it. So the Headspace app at this point has kind of two different tracks. So the first is these guided meditations. There's a lot of them. And those you can kind of pop into at any time. You don't really need any specific like training or background to use them. You just turn them on and they'll kind of talk you through everything. The other is called the Basics course, and that kind of walks you through actually learning the technique that Andy was talking about. So it is paced. So every time you log in, it will have a specific like practice for you to do. And as you work through them, it'll introduce a lot of different techniques and strategies. So I think it starts off, the first one is about 3 minutes. They build up to 10. You can go as far as like 15 and 20 minutes within this beginning meditation part of the app. To get there, you can search Basics course, or you can search beginning meditation, and then you can start from there. Once you've started one, when you automatically log into the app, it'll kind of pull up the next one in the course. So the experts recommend that you do this daily at the same time every day. They really recommend that you do it first thing in the morning, which is like the hardest thing, the hardest part of this, I think, but it is flexible and you can kind of do it whenever. You can also set up push notifications so that the app will actually like alert you like, hey, you need to meditate today. And again, this Basics course, this beginning meditation app will have a meditation for you to do every day. And it'll kind of walk you through really learning to meditate. And so the goal at the end is that you can comfortably sit for 20 minutes in silence without anyone guiding you and engage in that mindfulness technique. So that's kind of what it's building up to. Within that beginning meditation component, it talks about specific techniques that are kind of used in the practice. So these include things like body scans, noting, focused attention, visualization. Again, they're incorporated in the basics instruction. So if you're just going through that, you will get introduced to these within that course, but you can also access them at normal, like regular times whenever you need them. So a couple of my favorites are Remember the Blue Sky and Accepting the Mind. And they'll be used in any pack that you do. So you have the basics pack. There's also like gratitude packs, stress at work packs. Like it will kind of walk you through specific meditations on those topics. Again, the basics is just kind of learning the technique. The other thing that's kind of cool about them is that you can find them on YouTube. So I'll talk in a few seconds about kind of using these with clients, but so if you can see like the image on the screen, so body scan, say you forget how to do a body scan and you don't have access to your app for some reason, you can also Google Headspace body scan and it'll have this little animation, which is pretty cute. So the other component, so if say you're doing the basics course and you're just kind of learning how to meditate, and then you have something come up that you specifically want some guidance around within kind of the concept of mindfulness meditation, that's where these guided meditations come in. So you can just drop into them. They don't necessarily, they're not presented in a course always. Some of them have multiple sort of sessions, but for the most part, you can drop into them whenever you want. These include things like breath work. There's, as you can see, like there's mindfulness at work. They recently had like a Star Wars version, like a multiple Star Wars themed guided meditations. They have Sesame Street and things like that. So they're very cute. And you can access these individually whenever. They also don't upset your progress in a course. So you'll start to notice once you're doing these basics course work that it'll like show you where you're at when you log in. If you do these, it's not going to interrupt that, which is kind of nice. That wasn't always the case. They also have sort of specific ones on sleep, which is really nice. Technically, in the traditional sense, you don't really want to meditate right before bed. A lot of people do, but like in the Buddhist tradition, you would do that. But they have some really nice guidance around that. Okay, so how to use this with clients. So like I said, I've been using this app for a really long time. And one of the things that I kind of, especially when I started working with teenagers, realized is that this concept of mindfulness gets thrown around a lot, and kids are usually fairly aware of it. I know Iowa City schools in particular have like, I think it's Iowa City West, has like 10 minutes of mindfulness that they make you do at the start of the day. And any of the clients that I've worked with, they don't love it. They think it's kind of dorky and weird. So how do you like use this with clients? When is this useful? So if you maybe noticed before when we were talking about techniques, a lot of those techniques exist in a lot of different therapeutic modalities. So body scan is a core component of acceptance and commitment therapy. Noting is literally what we're doing when we're doing cognitive behavioral therapy, right? We're noticing the thoughts. So a lot of these little animations and videos within the techniques component can be really useful, even if you're not using the word mindfulness or meditation with clients. So that's the first piece. And again, those are accessible on YouTube, which is really cool. So say you're working on noting, you're helping a client be able to recognize distressing thoughts when they're having them and sort of see them as thoughts. And at least for me, I'm not always super interesting when I try to explain that. And so being able to watch with a client a cute little animation about it can be really useful. The other thing that I have found helpful is when you're working with resistant clients, sometimes being able to externalize what you're doing can be helpful. So for example, I cannot tell you how many times I've suggested doing a body scan with a client. And as soon as I start doing it, they're like, your voice sounds weird or something like that. Or like they kind of pull out of it because it's this weird, uncomfortable kind of like dynamic. And so what I have done instead is pull up one of the guided meditations, pull up the body scan, and sort of just be like, hey, this is something that a lot of people feel like help. Would you want to do it with me? And then you can both kind of have the experience of sitting together and collaboratively doing this thing, and then talk about your experiences. So I find it really helpful in that way, as opposed to kind of sitting there with like a body scan script and like reading it to a client. It just makes it feel a little bit more collaborative. And then also personally, like I feel less, I don't know, I don't want people to tell me my voice sounds weird. So if we can make fun of Andy's accent, like that's totally fine. So that's how I use it with clients. And then again, a lot of the stuff that's in the app is also available on YouTube. So if you're pulling up an animation for something that your client really likes or that really seems to resonate with them, you can always direct them towards YouTube and they can get access to it on their own. The basics course does not exist on YouTube, and the full guided meditations don't, but a lot of the psychoeducation and animations do. And again, there's a search bar at the top of the app. So basics or beginning will get you to all of that introductory stuff. Then you can also search for expert guidance for the little animations. And then you can just start searching and see what other guided meditations exist within the app. They have one really for everything at this point. So this next slide, if you're kind of like me and you want the receipts on everything, Headspace does a really good job of kind of documenting the research that's out there on their app specifically. There's a lot of research on the benefits of mindfulness meditation, but if you want to see like, okay, what about Headspace specifically? It's all there. I'll send out the PowerPoint so you can just click on the link and it will take you to the study. And the last little thing is my email address. I tried to go through things generally because I didn't want to get too much in the weeds. So if you do have specific questions about how to use this, or if you're having trouble finding something that I mentioned in this PowerPoint, you can email me and I'm more than happy to kind of like help you figure out how to do it. there were a couple things that came up in the Zoom. He is very charismatic. And he actually Andy, the guy who created it, did a lot, I think, for kind of getting mindfulness and meditation just into the public sphere as something that felt accessible and not quite so weird. And then, yeah, if you go to the Headspace website, they also have links to a lot of the research, especially when trying to get some buy-in from certain clients. Like, your clients, so if that's effective or not, but they can read up on that a little bit as well. All right. So that's all I had. Again, feel free to email me if you have any questions about using the app. It is kind of overwhelming at first. You can't really mess it up though. The only thing you can do is if you start a basics pack and then you switch. So like say you're in basics 1 and you switch to basics 2. If you go back to basics 1, it will restart everything. So if you're someone who really likes tracking your progress, just be aware of that. All right.
Kathryn, can I ask a question before you go?
Yeah.
What have been some of the things that you've seen as like a positive change, like in your own wellness from meditation?
Yeah. A lot. I mean, I'll just use an example. So like I am pretty bad with road rage. Less so in Iowa, but when I lived in Boston, it was pretty rough. And, sitting in traffic was really stressful for me. So my mind would just like start running. And I would just be running through all the things I need to do, the things I was missing doing, some negative thoughts about my fellow drivers, things like that. And so by doing Headspace and kind of learning this technique, I was able to sort of drop in, it's a term I use, but like drop into myself and just notice the thoughts. And they just kind of like get quieter, I think is sort of how I would describe it. So that's been really helpful just in general, being able to notice when I'm having a lot of thoughts and kind of like not buy into them as much. The sleep pack, the sleep guided meditations are actually really, really good. So it is a body scan technique that he walks you through. And I do that all the time when I can't sleep. I don't know, I could go into more of my like personal stuff, and it also helps so much with being a therapist, I think, because a lot of the skills, I think CBT is a really like, we're all trained in it. We all kind of know what to do with it, but really explaining to someone what noticing a thought is can be it's just hard to verbalize exactly what that's like. And so that's part of what I really love about this practice is you get much more acquainted with sort of like the technique of doing it, which I find helpful to be able to walk people through that.
Yeah, very cool. I think, just for people who are watching this back later, you were one of the therapists, the first therapist that like really reached out that was like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting to have Headspace offered. And there were a handful of more therapists that were like, this is something that I do every day for myself. And I'm so glad that Tanager is investing in this. So I'm just really excited to hear how other people start to get some of that, those good outcomes for themselves. So thank you so much for sharing this stuff with us today, Kathryn. I appreciate it so much. I don't know if anybody else had questions or anything.
I don't think so. But again, feel free to reach out to me. It is kind of overwhelming a little bit, just navigating it because I mean, it's very cool that it's grown as much as it has, but it does have a lot of content. So if you're accessing it because you want to learn how to meditate, that gets a little bit lost sometimes in there. So if you have any challenges with navigating it, I'm happy to help however I can. Oh,
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kathryn.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Bye.